I'd like to start this tape package out by saying I'm not a professional writer. I'm not a professional speaker. I am someone who only basically finished the 8th grade. You're probably wondering, why should you really listen to this and waste your time? Well, because as you'll hear, I have had an interesting life. And for some reason, the Lord has been with me all the way. I honestly don't know why. But you'll see that some of the things that I've been through, I mean, it's been an interesting time. And that's why I call it Dancing with the Devil while learning to love, because basically that's what I've done my whole entire life, and that's basically it in a nutshell. The reason that I'm doing this tape package isn't for the old fogies. It isn't for myself. It's because when you look around, folks, our kids need a helping hand. I'm not saying that I can give it to them, but I'm saying that I've done a lot of things that, thank God, I was able to get through them. And I think that it will help. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look around and figure out that something is not right with our education system. Something is not right with the way that we're programming our little kids. I mean, folks, please. I mean, you may be thinking that everything's great in your little castle, but go down to some of these neighborhoods and some of these areas. There are people hurting out there. There are kids, young little babies that are hurting. And it's just not fair. It's just not fair for so many to have so much and millions and billions of people to have nothing. That's not the way the whole thing was supposed to be set up. And I think we can change it. Is all we need to do is get a little fair. And that's what this tape is all about. And I thank you. Now, I'm not trying to act like I know anything, because I really honestly don't. Is all I know is a couple things, and that is that there are these spirits out there. There are these angels. There are these demons, regardless of what some of the thinkers who control everything want you not to believe. But these things do exist. I mean, our whole foundation of every nation that there is out there is based under these assumptions. And so therefore, with where I've been, I fully realize that they are there and they do exist. And that's what this whole talk is about. That's what my whole life has been about. And again, thanks a lot and God bless. I was approximately 3 pounds, according to my grandmother and my mom. I was born on, according to my mom, her 20th birthday. My grandma says my mom was born on August the 2nd, and they still kind of argue about that. My mom's birth certificate says August the 1st, but we all know that probably back in them days, records probably weren't anywhere as accurate as they are today. Anyway, I have an identical twin brother, and he was somewhere around 7 or 8 pounds. Needless to say, because of my size, I had to stay in the hospital for approximately 6 months in an incubator. Now, during this particular time, I of course had probably zilch contact with my mom, because at that point she already had approximately 5 other kids. Yes, 5 other kids by the time she was 20, counting me and my twin brother, made 7 kids by the time she had turned 20 years old. A lot for anybody, I must say. Anyway, while I was at this particular hospital, I had to go through a blood transfusion. And my dad tells me that neither he nor my mom was the same kind of blood that I particularly had. I really don't know nothing about that. My mom tells me that basically I didn't have the same kind of blood that she had, so they had to find a volunteer. And of course my dad used to kid me all the time. He said that it was a black lady that they had to use to give me her blood. And I always told him later on, well, that's probably where my blues music come from, and was from her particular blood. And of course all this happened while I was still, up to about 6 months there in the hospital. Now, later on, you will find some interesting things that tie back to this particular 6 months, as therapists these days will tell you that that was a very important time in my life. And later on down the road, I used to have people tell me that it looked like I was in a giant glass container somewhere and that I needed to break that container out. I'm referring to people that supposedly are psychics or, people that can see your aura or that type of situation. Used to tell me that I needed to figure out how to shatter and get out of this particular incubator. And of course, I hope with the love of the Lord, I did do that. At least I feel that I do, but I'm unable to see that type of vision, so I really honestly couldn't tell you. Now, to give you a quick rundown on the kids there up to that point, there was Tommy, he was the oldest. Then there was Marcia, and then there was Sherry, Vicky, Bobby, then me, I'm Lonnie, and then my twin brother, Donnie. Now, later on, the next year, I had a brother called Ricky, then a brother called Randy, and then a brother called Gary. So basically, if you add that up, by the time my mom was 24 years old, she had had 10 kids, which today is an astronomical number, but I understand for people from the country and people, as my dad was a Kentuckian, that was pretty normal for back in them days. But Lord knows there's no way you could finance that situation today. Now, quite obviously, I don't remember too much about that particular time, so what I'm telling you now is things that my mother and my grandmother and other people that I've talked to who were around in them days gave me the fill-in on some of this situation. Once I left the hospital, I did not go to my mom's house. I went to my aunt and uncle's house because she had only had one child, and so therefore they felt that she could give me the care that I needed at that particular time. And I believe after I was about 1 or 1.5 years old, somewhere in that bracket, I went to live with my mom and dad. Now I'd like to give you a little bit of a thumb sketch of my dad, Virgil T. Harris. Okay, up to that point, he was 23 years old when I was born. He was a country and western musician, meaning, in other words, he played in these hillbilly bars, played all these hold downs and places like that, and to hear the stories, it sounded like he was basically never home. He definitely was an alcoholic, and he definitely was a drug addict. I'll fill you in on him much later up on down the line, because that was just the beginning of his particular problems. Now, after I went back to my mom's house, I'm not sure what happened there, but basically due to the fact, again, her having so many kids, I wound up somewhere at the age of around 5 or 6 years old. I went back to live with Hard and Margaret. At this particular time, my twin brother, Donnie, went with me. Now, let me tell you about Hard and Margaret. Okay, Hard was a country guy. He never played music. He basically never went out to bars and drank or anything like that. He basically was supposedly the model type of a person. He worked the second shift, so I hardly ever got to see him. Now, Margaret, on the other hand, I'll tell you the very first incident that I can remember with Margaret. She was a large woman, so imagine to a very small little kid who was still quite underweight. She was tall and large, as I said. She seemed like gigantic to me from where I was at. The first thing that I can actually remember with Hard and Margaret was we were sitting at the table, and they had this big fine feast played there, and they had this weird looking meat. And I asked, "What is this?" And she immediately said, "It's pork, and you're going to eat it." And I said, "Well, I don't like pork." Now, how I knew that, I'm not sure, but I remember saying I do not like pork. And she said, "You'll eat it, and you'll eat every bite of it." And I pleaded with them. I said, "I do not like pork. I don't like pork." And she insisted that I would eat it. So I said, "Fine." I ate it. And needless to say, about 30 seconds later, I vomited all over the kitchen table. And, of course, made everybody sick. And that got me my first official beating from Margaret. Now, Margaret, I don't know what her real problem was, but she loved beating kids. I mean, if we looked cross-eyed, she would give us a beating. Now, at that particular time, I, of course, developed the pattern of wetting in the bed. And it was interesting because every night I would wet in the bed, and every morning I would get a whipping from her. And then we would have to take an afternoon nap, and I remember sometimes I would fall asleep on the couch, and of course she had plastic on it, as a lot of people did back in them days. I would wet on the couch. So she did get plastic sheets and all this stuff for the bed, but of course I wet the bed constantly all the time. I really honestly don't remember if my brother Don did or not, but that was the beginning of the beatings with Margaret. I actually believe now that Margaret actually just hated kids and she hated her life. Now, as I said, she did have a son. His name was Ronnie. Okay, at this particular time, I was beginning the first grade, and Hardin Margaret was thinking about adopting me and doing the paperwork and all that, and I was still happy about that. I'm not really sure why, but I was. And I'm getting a little ahead of the story here. I need to tell you about my brother Randy. Randy, who died when he was approximately 1 or 2 years old, I'm not really sure. My sister says that basically what happened, my dad was a very violent person, and he used to beat my mom all the time, and I guess make her do all kinds of wild stuff. And supposedly one afternoon he came home on Saturday from the jam sessions, as he normally did, and for some reason he busted all the windows out in the house, and Randy caught pneumonia. Now, of course, my mom now says no, that didn't happen. And my older sister, Sherry, says it did, because she remembers it quite well, because she talked to the police officer about exactly what happened. Now, as I said, my dad was a very mean person. I don't know if that's the way they raised him in Kentucky back in them days, but he was a very violent person, and he drank consecutively. And later on, as I said, he did do drugs and other things that go along with that particular situation. That is one of the reasons why I wound up going back over with Hardin Margaret. So as I said, now I'm back here with Hardin Margaret. This is about the time that I had my very first sexual experience. Now, what that sexual experience was with me and my twin brother. We did just have it, I guess you just learn it at that age to start messing with each other. I'm really not sure where it actually came from at that particular time. But at the same time, my cousin Ronnie, who was a freshman in high school, was molesting me, making me go down on him, doing the butt thing. It started out, well, hey, come over here and give me a massage, and I had to give him a massage, and next thing I know, well, massage down further, and then, of course, as, they wind up doing, well, go ahead and massage that's part of the massage, and as I said, he was molesting me approximately every day. I honestly don't know if he did my brother Don that way or not. Now, Don did tell me that our other cousin, whose name was Buddy, molested him when he was only 2 years old at my dad's house. Again, that's his story. He did say that actually happened, and this he has said just as recently as just 2 years ago when we went to our dad's funeral. Anyway, Ronnie would molest me every day, so I actually come to believe that it was normal. I mean, if you don't know no difference, how do you know it's not normal? It's just like, anything else. If you think that watching TV 10 hours a day is normal, then, you're not going to know that it may not be normal. So anyway, I thought, well, okay, this is normal, so obviously I decided to do the same thing with the next door neighbor, who, of course, happened to be a little girl that was the same age as me. So I have her back there in the garage.